Hi, my name is Lauren Berkmeyer, and this is my student-created unit on the topic of maps. So the audience that our units are set for is the 4th grade, and this unit follows the Ohio Academic Content Standards. For the social studies standard that we chose, my group chose, we chose the Spatial Thinking and Skills standard, number 9. It says a map scale in cardinal and intermediate directions can be used to describe the relative location of physical and human characteristics of Ohio and the United States. So the objective of my unit, this unit is based on maps and how maps are useful tools that can be used for multiple purposes. It includes a language arts, math, and science lesson that are all connected to that social studies standard as explained before. The standard was chosen because our world is growing in its dependence on technology. But when technology fails, it's important that we can go back on those basic skills of being able to use a map, knowing how to tell directions, and other examples like that. So the skill of being able to read a map can really help people learn about the landscape in different parts of the world. And learning about that landscape can really help people gain a better understanding of the Earth's surface. Therefore, students should understand why maps are important and be able to successfully read different types of maps. So I'm going to begin with the language arts lesson plan. So this lesson plan is interdisciplinary connected with social studies. So in this lesson plan, students will use maps and incorporate academic language from social studies curriculum while learning about maps and create their own map of their hometown. This lesson plan also connects with arts because students will use markers, crayons, and other materials to create their own maps of their hometowns. Now, the Ohio Academic Content Standards that this lesson follows is, of course, the social studies standard that is a part of this whole unit, and another is in the Reading Language Arts 4.1. This standard says that students should refer to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. Another standard that goes along with this lesson is Reading Fluency 4.3. So students should know and apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills in decoding words by using combined knowledge of all letter-sound correspondences, syllabication patterns, and morphology, which would be like root words and affixes, prefixes. So they should be able to use that to read accurately unfamiliar multisyllabic words in context and out of context. So the objective of this lesson, it uses maps as a directional tool to get from place to place, as depicted in the book Oh, the Places You'll Go, to enhance students' knowledge of traveling and how maps can be a useful tool during that time. Students will be able to identify parts of a map such as the scale, cardinal directions, and places on the map by creating a map of their town. Next, the procedure for this lesson. So for the language arts lesson, it follows the 6E model, which is engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate, and the E technology that is used throughout the whole lesson. So to engage the students, I would begin by discussing places they have visited or places they want to travel to. Then we would explore different types of maps through discussion of the parts of a map. So we would talk about the cardinal directions, we would talk about a compass, we could talk about a scale that's on a map, we could talk about the roads, railroads, rivers, waterways, any other parts of a map such as those. Then I would explain the purpose of a map through an informational video. So it's important that students understand how maps are used to help you get from place to place. And so this informational video, it shows students a little bit more about a map and how a map can be used to find your exact location, along with finding directions from place to place. Then we would elaborate about, before we elaborate, I would have the students, I would conduct a read aloud with the book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. So I would read aloud the book, and throughout the book, there are many different places that I could stop and ask questions, such as there's a part where the boy or the main character is stuck between having to choose two different paths. And I might ask the students, well, which path would you take? Would you take the path that everyone else travels on that's bright and welcoming? Or would you take the path that is untrodden, no one else has traveled on that path? It's very dark and dingy. Kind of seems a little scary at first, but maybe once you start along that path, maybe it's completely normal. So I would ask questions such as those to students throughout the novel and link in the idea of maps and how sometimes with maps you can find new places. Then I would elaborate with the students and have them talk in pairs or small groups about the main idea of Oh, the Places You'll Go, and how they might relate that to their own lives, such as in the example of the question that I used. They might relate that and be like, well, this is something they might have the chance to do a new experience. So they'd be like, well, I'm going to choose to participate in that new experience, maybe by joining a new club or sports. Then to evaluate the students, I would have the students create their own maps of their hometown in relation to their home. So they would put their home on the map wherever it is located in the town, and then they would have to put on other locations such as a church, school, the park, doctor's offices, grocery stores, places like that. And then throughout this lesson, e-technology will be used because at the very end, after the read aloud, after the students created their maps, technology would be used to allow students to participate in a virtual tour of either a museum. So what I chose in the lesson is the Columbus Zoo, the Smithsonian, which is a museum in Washington, D.C., or the White House. So the students can choose, and I would show that up on the board and they could take a virtual tour. Now, the Catholic connection I would make with this lesson is the idea that God has a plan for each and every one of us. And through God's plan for us, we find new places and meet new people, spreading the Catholic faith to others, which is really what God wants us to do. Now, to move on to the math lesson plan, the interdisciplinary connections of this lesson are social studies. Students will be asked to answer word problems involving the use of maps and map scales. Art. Students will be asked to complete their maps by adding a map scale and drawing the distances between different locations. And language arts. So students will need to be able to understand what is being asked within each word problem, and they will have to comprehend the meaning of each question. So the content standards, from the Ohio Academic Content Standards are 4th grade. So the first one says that students need to be able to multiply or divide to solve word problems involving multiplicative comparison by using drawings and equations with a symbol for the unknown number to represent the problem, distinguishing multiplicative comparison from additive comparison. Drawings don't need to show details, but they should show the mathematics in the problem. So that would be like using models. The other standard that I chose is that students need to be able to solve multi-step word problems posed with whole numbers and having whole number answers using the 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, including problems in which remainders must be interpreted. Represent these problems using equations with a letter standing for the unknown quantity. Assess the reasonableness of answers using mental computation and estimation strategies, including rounding. So the main objective of this lesson is to improve the student's ability to understand and solve word problems through practice solving word problems pertaining to the maps that they created during the language arts lesson. They will analyze these maps when describing landforms and the procedure. So this lesson is set up in a backwards design. And so first you want to identify the desired results. So those results that I identified is that after completing this lesson, students should be able to problem solve when reading word problems and create effective equations that will help them solve those word problems. Also, I think students need to be able to correctly solve multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction problems because that's definitely key in being able to solve word problems in general. Then you determine the acceptable evidence. So I think it would be acceptable where student learning will be done through the use of word problems that students must solve in connection to the maps that they created during the language arts lesson. So they will use those maps they created to find maybe the distance from their home to the school, or how many crops are in a field, things like that. And then lastly, you want to plan your learning experience. So after looking at the desired results and the acceptable evidence, I thought the best way to review the steps to solving a word problem and then solve that word problem would be through the use of a list, like a step-by-step basis, and then a think aloud. By completing a think aloud, this often helps students understand more of the process, where you're coming from, what you're doing, why you're doing something, and so on. Next, the science lesson plan that I created. The interdisciplinary connections include social studies, where students will use their created maps to find. Oh, that's wrong. So this lesson connects with social studies, where students will complete an activity with the gizmo. It's a rotating map gizmo, working to figure out the layout of a map. And with the arts, students will work with clay to create different types of landforms. So the Ohio Academic Content Standard that this lesson falls in is one of the Ohio with Earth and space science. So this standard deals with Earth's surface, which has specific characteristics and landforms that can be identified. So the objective of this lesson is that it aims to have students understand the types of landforms, how they are formed, and how they are depicted on a map. The procedure that would occur within this lesson, so I would begin by introducing the topic of landforms to the students. I would show a crash course video as a good overview. It gives good examples and explains a lot. And it's a nice short little 3-minute video that would be a great way to intrigue students. So afterwards, I would discuss with the class what types of landforms they noticed near the school, grocery stores, and near their homes. At this point, I would give them some clay, and they would use that clay to create a landform that was mentioned in the video. And I think this is a great way to let students have a little bit of fun, just making mountains or plateaus, rivers, oceans, stuff like that. And during the lesson, I would pull up a National Geographic website, which talks about landforms to further the students' understanding of landforms. And then delve a little deeper into the topic of landforms and looking at how they're made. And then afterwards, I would complete an activity using the rotating map gizmo and have students complete their own maps during the activity. So by using the gizmo, it would help students create their own layout of a map based on directions given. So they could rotate the center of the gizmo to show where a place would be located in based on the cardinal directions, like north, south, east, or west.